She said I was a loser, right after I laid out the photos. 5 men, 4 nights, her hand on every one of them, places a wedding ring should have stopped. But then she laughed, and told me she needed real men, said I was just holding her back. The worst part? She wasn't even hiding it anymore. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You should be grateful for the attention I bring to your boring little life." That's when I knew this wasn't just cheating, it was war. I built my business with receipts and records, and she forgot. I keep everything. She took my trust for a joke, so I made her lies into evidence. And now, the clock's ticking. My name is Harold Bennett, and I'm 45 years old. I run a small repair shop on Oak Street, live in my paid-off colonial home, and take pride in doing things right the first time. My wife Denise craves the spotlight more than our quiet evenings. Her Instagram feed sparkles brighter than our porch light. Every night I retreat to my garage sanctuary. Tools lined up clean, classic rock humming low, the sweet tang of motor oil in the air. 20 years of marriage taught me to keep perfect records. Every receipt, every transaction, every odd charge on our accounts filed away in leather binders. While Denise chases her freedom trips with her glamorous friends, I maintain my ledgers with the same patience I give to rebuilding engines. But let me start from the beginning. It was the second week of May when Denise packed for her Miami girls' trip. You know the kind. Those getaways where wives shed their rings faster than their sundresses. I helped load her matching luggage into the Uber. Played the supportive husband role like I'd done the past 3 summers. "Don't forget your sunscreen," I called out, getting only a dismissive wave in return. First night, the posts started rolling in. Denise under pink neon signs, drink in hand. That smile I used to think was just for me, now broadcast to whoever scrolled past. The humidity made every photo slightly hazy, like someone had breathed on the lens. Made me think of those crime scene photos where everything's just a bit off. Ever notice how social media makes everything look innocent at first glance? There she was on some yacht, champagne flute raised high, surrounded by her girls. But in the background, there were always men. Strange hands appearing on hips, faces I didn't recognize leaning too close in group shots. I told myself it was nothing. Just friendly vacation photos, the kind of stuff that happens when people get caught up in the moment. I retreated to my garage each night, trying to lose myself in the familiar comfort of organizing tools and checking inventory. But the fluorescent lights just buzzed louder, matching the tension building in my gut. I kept scrolling through our text thread, reading between the lines of her vague responses. "How's the trip going?" "Amazing." "You'd hate it. Too many people." "Where are you staying tonight?" "Oh, somewhere downtown. Girls found this cute spot." Never a hotel name. Never a straight answer about plans. Just exclamation points and emojis painting over the gaps. You'd think after 20 years of marriage I'd know better than to torture myself with social media. But there I was, night after night, watching 15-second reels of cocktail glasses clinking and beach sunsets fading while some pop song about freedom played in the background. Each new post twisted that knot in my stomach tighter. The worst part wasn't the photos or the videos, it was remembering how I defended her to my buddies. "Denise just needs her space sometimes," I'd say. "It's healthy for couples to have their own lives." Now those words tasted like copper in my mouth. I still remember that Thursday night clearly. The garage had gotten too quiet, even with the radio on, so I moved to the living room. The TV was playing some home renovation show on mute, just shapes and colors moving across the screen while I sat there wondering when exactly my marriage had started renovating itself without my input. The first thing I noticed about the notification was the timestamp. 11:42 p.m. Late for a casual message. Then I saw who it was from. Mike Thompson, husband of Denise's best friend Sarah. Mike and I weren't close, barely talked except at neighborhood barbecues. My thumb hovered over his name for a good 30 seconds before I tapped it. There's a moment, right before you open a message you know will change everything, where time seems to slow down. Like those split seconds before a car crash when you can see it coming but can't swerve away. I felt my chest tighten as I opened our message thread, watching those 3 dots bounce as Mike typed something else. The room seemed to shrink around me as I stared at my phone screen, waiting for whatever evidence Mike was about to share. Something told me those photos wouldn't show innocent fun under Miami nights. They'd show the truth I'd been avoiding since Denise first started planning these trips. The screenshots from Mike loaded one after another, each one hitting harder than the last. 5 different bars, 5 different men, all with their hands where a wedding ring should have made them think twice. The timestamps marched across 3 nights. 11:42 p.m. at Blue Martini, 1:15 a.m. at E11 even, 12:33 a.m. at Live. Each photo tagged with a location that painted a map of betrayal across downtown Miami. You know what's funny? I noticed the little details first. Maybe my brain needed to focus on something besides my wife wrapped around strangers. The distinct blue and white napkins from Blue Martini. The step-and-repeat wall at E11 even with its repeating logo. Those paper wristbands they give you at Live. Hot pink on Thursday nights, apparently. The kind of details that make lies hard to deny. My printer hummed to life, warming up like it did every morning when I printed invoices. But these weren't invoices. Each photo came out sharp and clear. The colors a little harsh under my office lights. I laid them in chronological order. My hands steady despite everything. That's the thing about running a business. You learn to handle paperwork methodically, even when it's tearing your world apart. Remember those old detective shows where they pin everything to a corkboard? I had my modern version spread out on the granite countertop we'd picked together 10 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me, using our shared kitchen to document how she'd broken everything we'd shared. I needed this to be bulletproof. A remote confrontation would just give her room to spin stories, delete evidence, warn her new friends. No, this needed to happen face to face, where she couldn't hide behind a screen or brush it off as vacation fun. The manila folder was crisp and new. I always kept a stack in my home office. Funny how something so ordinary could feel so heavy as I wrote Miami Denise across the tab. Each photo went in chronologically, with my notes paperclipped to the corresponding image. The kind of organization that had built my business would now document its potential undoing. I pulled up my calendar app, found her return flight info. 3 days. 72 hours to sit with what I knew, to plan what I'd say. I set the folder next to the fruit bowl we'd gotten as a wedding gift. Right where she couldn't miss it, couldn't pretend she didn't see it. Those 3 days crawled by. I'd catch myself staring at that folder during meals, while making coffee, as I grabbed my keys each morning. It sat there like a time bomb, ticking down to her return. When I finally heard the garage door motor grinding open, my whole body tensed. The familiar sound of her rolling luggage thumping over the tile echoed through the house. I stood in the kitchen, that folder somehow both burning hot and ice cold under my palm. The doorknob turned. I could hear her humming some pop song, probably one that had been playing in those Miami clubs. My throat was dry, but my voice would work. I had one question ready, one she couldn't laugh off or dance around. Want to tell me about the guy in the white blazer at 11 even? She dropped her designer carry-on by the door and breezed past me like I was part of the kitchen fixtures. The Miami tan made her wedding ring stand out even more, or maybe I was just fixated on it now. Seriously, Harold, I just got home. Can't this wait until I've had a shower? She reached for a glass, all casual confidence. No, I don't think it can. I spread the photos across the counter, one by one, like dealing cards in a game I never wanted to play. Let's talk about Tuesday night at Blue Martini. The guy with the tribal tattoo seemed pretty friendly. Her hand paused halfway to the faucet. I kept going, my voice steady, as if I was walking a client through an invoice. Then, Wednesday at E11 even. White blazer guy. Real sharp dresser. Expensive. Watch. Thursday was busy. Live first, then back to E11 even. 2 different guys there. And Friday, I tapped the last photo. Club space. He's got his hands pretty low on your hips for someone who just met you. She turned slowly, crossing her arms. The irritation in her eyes shifted to something theatrical, like she was getting ready to perform. Oh, honey. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Are you really going to do this? Make a big drama out of me having some fun? She waved her hand at the photos like they were showing nothing more serious than spilled coffee. 5 men in 4 nights isn't some fun, Denise. It's a pattern. You know what this is? She leaned against the counter, somehow looking down at me despite being shorter. This is why I needed that trip. You're such a loser, Harold. So caught up in your little shop, your boring routine. I need real men. Men who understand what a woman like me deserves. The words burned my ears like I'd stuck my head in one of my shop's furnaces. My hands wanted to shake, but I kept them flat on the counter. If that's how you see it, then we've got bigger problems than just Miami. This isn't a one-time mistake we can fix. This is who you are. Who I am? She actually laughed. I'm a woman embracing her freedom, living her best life. You should be grateful for the attention I bring to our marriage. Do you know how many of your friends' wives envy our dynamic? There it was. The shift from accusation to marketing. Like she was selling timeshares instead of explaining betrayal. Every word came wrapped in social media hashtags and self-help slogans. Here's what I know, I said, keeping my voice level. Either we rebuild this with real respect, or we end it cleanly. Those are the only options on the table. The smirk that crossed her face told me everything. She grabbed her carry-on, the wheels clicking against our tile floor as she headed for the bedroom. "You're cute when you try to be tough, Harold." Her laughter mixed with the sound of zippers opening. "Let me know when you're done playing detective." I stood there in our kitchen, my kitchen now, I supposed, staring at those photos. Each one was a moment where our vows meant nothing to her, where "till death do us part" became "till Miami do us part." The counter where we'd shared breakfast for 15 years now felt like an evidence table. The kitchen wasn't a home anymore. It was an office where I needed to handle this like any other business crisis. My lawyer's card was in my wallet, crisp and white against the worn leather. I'd called him yesterday, set up the morning appointment. 9 a.m. sharp, because that's when tough decisions should be made. My finger traced the embossed letters of his name while the sound of Denise's shower ran upstairs, probably washing away the last traces of Miami. The next morning hit different. You know that clarity you get after a storm, when the air feels scrubbed clean. That's how it felt walking into my lawyer's office at 9 sharp. The reception area smelled like leather and coffee, and everything gleamed like it had been polished twice. My attorney, Jim Mackenzie, had the kind of desk that said he won more than he lost. "Harold," he said, sliding the divorce petition across that mahogany surface. "Are you sure about this? Once we file, there's no quiet takebacks." I pulled out my folder. 5 different men in Miami. Got the proof right here. My voice stayed steady, like I was discussing a parts inventory. You ever notice how signing your name feels weightless most days? Not this time. The pen felt heavy as I worked through each signature block, each initial line. 15 years of marriage, reduced to a stack of forms and a filing fee. "We'll push for a clean split," Jim said, tapping the papers into alignment. "Keep the business separate. Maintain the house since it's paid off. Nothing extravagant, just what you've earned." For about 6 hours, I felt like I had my feet under me again. The court clerk stamped our paperwork, and I went back to my shop, turned on the compressor, and let the familiar rhythm of work wash over me. Remember what I said about keeping good records? While I worked on a transmission rebuild, I pictured those neat rows of business receipts, each one ready to prove what was mine. But Denise? She didn't waste any time showing me how naive that confidence was. 3 days later, Jim called. "Harold, we've got a problem." His voice had that careful tone doctors use before bad news. Her response just hit my desk. "She's going after half the business." My wrench slipped, knuckles banging against steel. "She can't. I started it before we met. She's claiming her social networking built your client base. Says she was an unofficial partner." He paused. "And Harold, she's painting you as controlling. Says you monitored her movements, isolated her from friends." The words hit like body blows. Each accusation twisted reality until I barely recognized our marriage. According to her filing, every business decision I'd made was about control. Every quiet night at home became proof of manipulation. "But we've got documentation," I said. "Receipts, contracts, everything." "Facts matter," Jim agreed. "But perception matters more." We filed a scheduling order to lock in deadlines. Standard stuff. Her attorney buried it under 23 separate motions. "They're playing for time, forcing us to spend money responding to each one." I looked around my shop, tools organized on pegboards, diagnostic computers humming, decades of work built on precision and patience. All of it suddenly felt fragile. "What's our next move?" "Respond point by point. Carefully. Every denial needs backup." Jim's chair creaked through the phone. "But Harold, be ready. This gets worse before it gets better." He wasn't wrong. That evening, I pulled into my driveway just as the sun was setting. A guy in a cheap suit stood by my front door, holding a thick envelope. "Harold Bennett?" He thrust the papers at me. "You've been served." Inside, under the kitchen lights that used to feel warm, I spread out the new filing. 43 pages of demands and accusations. Denise wanted her freedom. And apparently, freedom cost exactly half of everything I'd built. The numbers made my stomach clench. Business valuation, property splits, attorney fees. Each page threatened to dismantle another piece of my life. I set the stack next to my Miami Denise folder. The contrast stark. My evidence was clean, organized. Facts in neat rows. Her filings were a tornado of claims and demands, each one designed to cloud the truth until no one could see it clearly. The game had changed. This wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. There was nothing left to save. This was about saving everything else. My business, my home, my reputation. And it was all happening in open court, where anyone could read every word. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten during the reading. The kitchen clock ticked past 9, and somewhere in Miami, I wondered if Denise was laughing about how she'd turned my own careful nature against me. All those years of building things right, taking my time, following the rules, and here she was, using the system to tear it all down. You ever watch one of those nature shows where a python slowly wraps around its prey? That's what these legal proceedings felt like. Each coil tighter than the last, and every time you think you've got room to breathe, another loop appears. 6 weeks into the divorce, and I was drowning in paperwork. Every morning brought a new filing, each one thicker than the last. My attorney, Jim, had warned me about the costs, but watching my savings drain away still felt like slow torture. We've got to respond to each motion, he explained during our third emergency meeting that month. The AC in his office was cranked so high, my coffee got cold before I could finish it. Every time we don't, it looks like we're conceding their point. I shifted in my chair, my work shirt still damp with sweat from the shop. But we won them all so far, right? Jim's expression tightened. We did, initially, but they're appealing everything, requesting continuances, demanding additional discovery. He slid another stack of papers across his desk. And judges, well, they're starting to listen to her narrative. That word, narrative, it kept coming up, like we were writing competing novels instead of fighting for my life's work. I'd thought facts would be enough. Receipts, contracts, documentation, the bones of my business laid out in black and white. But Denise's team had turned everything into a story about control and liberation. Your silence during proceedings, Jim continued. They're spinning it as arrogance. And these Miami trips she took, they're calling them necessary escapes from domestic oppression. My knuckles went white around my coffee cup. Through the window behind Jim's desk, I could see heat waves dancing off the parking lot. Summer had turned brutal, and my shop's garage was like working inside an oven, but I kept it open late every night, trying to bank extra cash for whatever came next. What about the business records? I asked. 20 years of clean books have to count for something. They do. But Denise's latest affidavit, he tapped another document. She's claiming she was the real networker. Says her social connections brought in half your high-end clients. Without documentation showing otherwise, the court might buy it. You know what's funny? I'd always been proud of running a drama-free shop. No shouting, no thrown tools, no slammed doors. Now that same steady nature was being used against me. Every calm response looked cold. Every organized record seemed controlling. Back at the shop that evening, I stayed late again, finishing up a transmission rebuild while my phone kept buzzing with email notifications from Jim's office. More motions, more demands, more story spinning. The heat was suffocating, even with all the bay doors open and fans running full blast. Sweat soaked through my shirt as I worked, but I couldn't afford to close early anymore. Not with legal bills eating through my reserves and the threat of asset division hanging over everything. I kept a copy of Denise's latest affidavit on my desk. 43 pages of creative writing that turned our 15 years together into some kind of prison break story. According to her, every business decision I'd made was about control. Every quiet night at home was isolation. Even my habit of keeping receipts became evidence of obsessive monitoring. Sunday evening rolled around and I finally admitted what I'd been avoiding. I was losing. Not the truth. I still had that. But the truth doesn't always win, does it? Not when the other side knows how to tell a better story. I closed the shop blinds and sat at my desk with a legal pad. Item by item, I listed everything that could be at risk. Diagnostic computers, lifts, specialty tools, parts inventory. The numbers kept growing until my hand cramped. If Denise's team convinced a judge she deserved half, liquidation would be the only way to pay out. 15 years of careful building, reduced to auction lots and fire sales. The calculator on my phone glowed in the dim office. Each tap of the keys felt like another nail in a coffin I'd somehow built myself. By the time I finished the inventory, the summer sun had set, leaving me alone with columns of numbers that all spelled the same thing: defeat. Monday morning hit like a hangover, though I hadn't touched a drop. The inventory numbers from Sunday night haunted me while I made coffee, each sip tasting like surrender. You ever notice how defeat has a way of making even routine things feel heavy? The coffee maker's gurgle sounded like mockery. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open to a blank email. The cursor blinked where I'd typed my attorney's name. 3 sentences. That's all it would take. I've reconsidered. Let's discuss settlement terms. When can we meet? The morning light caught the edge of my wedding band. still sitting in a dish by the sink where I'd dropped it weeks ago. Funny how a simple gold circle could mock you from across a room. To hell with pride, I muttered, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Sometimes, you have to. My phone buzzed. Frank's name lit up the screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Frank DeLuca had been my rock after the warehouse break-in 5 years back. 3 nights of inventory checks and security upgrades while he told Desert Storm stories to keep me focused. But right then, I didn't want war stories. I wanted peace. Harold, his gravel voice crackled before I could speak. Tell me you haven't done anything stupid yet. Define stupid. Jim called. Said you might be thinking about rolling over. I glanced at the laptop screen. It's not rolling over if you're being realistic. Realistic? He barked a laugh. Since when does realistic mean letting someone rob you twice? Frank, no, shut up and listen. You're doing what every guy does when he's hurt. Confusing emotion with strategy. You think you're being logical, but you're just tired of feeling like shit. The coffee went bitter in my mouth. He wasn't wrong. Remember what you told me after the break-in? He continued. You said, they got past the locks, but they can't beat the books. You showed me every serial number, every invoice, every insurance form. That warehouse crew thought they'd cleaned you out, but your paperwork brought them down. I remembered those nights, hunched over ledgers while Frank kept watch. The police had called it excessive documentation. The DA called it a prosecutor's dream. This isn't the same thing, I said. The hell it isn't. Denise thinks she's got you beat because she's louder, better at playing victim. But you've got the one thing that never blinks. Documentation. 20 years of it. My eyes drifted to the cabinet where I kept my business files. 2 decades of meticulous record-keeping. Every receipt, every bank statement, every travel itinerary. I'm coming by the shop at 4, Frank declared. Print everything your lawyer said you could use. Bank records, phone logs, travel stuff, and grab a calendar. What for? Because we're going to work this like a job, not a marriage. How long until court? I checked my phone. 60 days. Final hearings locked in. Perfect. 60 days to turn your paper trail into a noose. You in? The resignation email glowed on my screen, cursor still blinking. I clicked delete. Yeah, I said. I'm in. Good. Now go be a businessman. I'll see you at 4. The line went dead. I sat there a moment feeling something shift inside my chest. Not hope exactly. More like purpose. I drove to the shop and pulled the bank statements first. 5 years of joint accounts, each Miami trip its own chapter of suspicious withdrawals. Next came phone records Jim had subpoenaed. Travel itineraries. Credit card statements. The printer hummed for almost an hour. On my office wall hung a corkboard usually reserved for invoices. I cleared it with one sweep and found a calendar. 60 days. Each one a step towards something that felt less like survival and more like surgery. My pen circled the final day. Day 60. The hearing date looked different now. Not a deadline for defeat, but a target for precision. Frank was right. I'd been fighting this like a husband. All hurt pride and raw nerves. Time to fight it like an auditor. Time to let the paperwork do what paperwork does best. Tell the truth. Without emotion. I placed the first stack of bank statements on my desk and uncapped a highlighter. The numbers wouldn't blink. Neither would I. Frank spread the Miami photos across my workbench like he was dealing cards. Authentication's our foundation, he said, tapping each image. These aren't just pictures of your wife being stupid. They're time-stamped proof with background details we can verify. I leaned in, studying the shots I'd avoided looking at directly. What kind of details? See this wristband? He pointed to a neon band on one guy's arm. That's from Saints and Sinners. Private club requires membership scan for entry. Those step-and-repeat walls behind them? Logo placement tells us exactly which VIP section they were in. The methodical approach helped distance me from the gut punch of the images. And that helps how? Because clubs keep entry logs. Hotels keep folios. Restaurants keep receipts. We're not trying to prove she's a bad person. We're proving she was exactly where these show her. Spending money that wasn't just hers. I nodded, remembering the careful systems I'd built for my business. Documentation over declaration. Exactly. Now, about this guy. Frank tapped one photo showing Denise wrapped around a tall guy with a Miami Heat cap. Jim says we can serve him for testimony. He's the cleanest story. Thought she was single, has texts to prove it. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to focus on process. How do we reach him? I've got a PI friend down there who tracked his business address. Guy owns a boat rental company, runs sunset tours. Seems he's not thrilled about being played either. I pulled out my ledger. Old habit when planning anything complex. What's our sequence look like? Frank grabbed a marker and moved to the whiteboard I used for job schedules. He drew 2 parallel lines. Lane 1. Authenticate every photo with third-party records. Lane 2. Follow the money trail from joint accounts to Miami spending. Both lanes lead to your court date. I started making notes while Frank outlined witness preparation. The basketball cap guy, Mark something, would need careful handling. No revenge agenda. Just facts about what Denise had claimed about her status. My attorney Jim called mid-morning to confirm interstate deposition rules. We can do it remote, he said. But timing's tight. Judge Matthews runs a strict calendar. I checked our countdown board. How many days do we need? For a clean deposition? 3 days minimum, plus time for filing and response. Frank was already counting backward from day 60 on the whiteboard. That puts first prep call around day 45, he said. Initial contact needs to happen this week. We spent the next hours organizing evidence into labeled binders. Bank statements showed clear patterns. Large withdrawals before trips. Credit card charges at places matching the photo backgrounds. Each receipt and log entry got its own sleeve. Arranged to tell the story without emotion. Remember, Frank said as we rehearsed presentation flow, the judge needs facts, not feelings. No editorializing, no bitter ex-husband stuff, just numbers and dates. I practiced walking through the sequence, establish timeline, verify locations, confirm spending sources, introduce witness testimony. It felt like preparing for a business audit, which, in a way, it was. The Miami guy, Mark Torres, according to the PI report, agreed to a preliminary call that evening. His voice was steady, professional. Look, I'm not out to cause drama, he said. But she told me she was divorced, showed me papers and everything. Finding out she was married, that wasn't right. I appreciate your willingness to go on record, I said, sticking to the script Frank and Jim had prepared. We just need the truth. Yeah, well, I've still got the texts and receipts from the boats we took out. She paid with joint cards, said it was all settled in the divorce. We scheduled the remote deposition for day 43, giving us cushion before the hearing. Jim would handle the technical details. My job was to keep everything organized and admissible. By midnight, Frank and I had filled 3 binders with labeled evidence. I stood at the workbench, double-checking section dividers while he updated our timeline. Day 43, he said, marking the deposition date. That's our next milestone. I set my phone alerts for morning bank downloads. The latest statements would complete our financial timeline. The shop felt different now, more like a war room than a garage. But this was a war of paper and procedure, not emotion and accusations. The next morning hit different. You know that feeling when puzzle pieces suddenly click? That's what happened as I spread bank statements across my workbench, coffee growing cold beside me. Look at this pattern, I said to Frank, who'd shown up at dawn with donuts and determination. Every Miami trip starts with a withdrawal. 5 grand here, 7 there. Frank leaned in, squinting at the dates. And these transfers to her personal account? Yeah, always 3 days before wheels up. My finger traced the timeline we'd built. She wasn't just playing around. She was funding it with our money. Remember those old-school transparencies teachers used to overlay? That's what it felt like as Frank lined up screenshots with transaction records. The yacht. Photos matched exactly with charges at Miami Marina. The neon-lit bar scenes? Time-stamped right after ATM withdrawals. Hold up, Frank said, pulling out his phone calculator. Let's total this. My stomach dropped as the numbers added up. 47,000 over 8 months, cleaned out from accounts I'd trusted her to share. The joint business account I'd added her to years ago, back when trust meant something. That old motor oil smell in my shop suddenly felt thick, choking. You're not looking at adultery anymore, buddy. Frank's voice had that steel edge from his MP days. This is fraud, plain and simple. I'd been so focused on the marriage betrayal, I'd missed the bigger violation. She hadn't just cheated, she'd stolen. Systematically. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Remember what we said about documentation? Frank tapped the bank statements. This isn't just proof of affairs, it's proof of financial misconduct. I called Jim right there. Speakerphone echoing off the garage walls. His intake of breath told me everything. This changes our approach, Jim said. Adultery speaks to character, but misappropriation of funds? That's actionable harm. Send me everything you've got. We're updating our filing today. For the next hour, I revised my opening statement notes. No more focus on broken vows or Miami betrayals. This was about systematic deception, about abuse of financial trust. The moral outrage transformed into cold, hard numbers. Check your email, Frank said around noon. Hotel confirmation letters just came in. Sure enough, there they were. Detailed folios showing room charges, dates, times, each one matching our timeline exactly. Even better, they showed double occupancy despite being booked as single rooms. Mark's testimony slots in perfectly now, I said, referring to the Miami boat guy. His timeline confirms when she was using these rooms. Frank nodded, adding the hotel documents to our evidence binder. And his text messages prove she claimed to be single while spending joint funds. Double deception. I sat back, running both hands through my hair. The betrayal had morphed from something personal into something provable, something that couldn't be dismissed as just another bitter divorce dispute. Say it out loud, Frank prompted, sliding my legal pad closer. What's our new core argument? I took a breath, finding the words. The adultery proves character, but the siphoning proves motive and damage. The sentence felt right, like a key turning in a lock. There it is. Frank clapped my shoulder. That's your case in one line. We spent the afternoon packing my trial bag. Binders labeled by date, tab, markers color-coded for quick reference, copies of everything in triplicate. The physical work of it helped settle my mind around the shift in strategy. The late afternoon sun slanted through my shop windows, catching dust motes above the workbench where it all came together, where private heartbreak had transformed into professional misconduct, where emotion gave way to evidence. Remember, Frank said as we finished organizing the last exhibit, when you present this, you're not a wronged husband. You're a business owner who discovered financial fraud. Keep it clinical. I nodded, running my finger along the spines of our evidence binders. The words came naturally now. Adultery proves character. Siphoning proves motive and damage. The courthouse steps felt steeper that morning, like each one was testing my resolve. I'd walked them dozens of times for status hearings, but day 60 had its own gravity. Frank matched my pace, both of us carrying leather briefcases packed with color-coded binders. Remember, he muttered, let the evidence do the heavy lifting. You know that moment when you're about to start a complex repair job? When all your tools are laid out just right and you can see the whole sequence in your head? That's how I felt walking through security. Prepared, methodical, ready. The courtroom oak panels still held that same polish I remembered from preliminary hearings, but today they felt more like a workshop than a theater. My place was at the plaintiff's table, my binders arranged exactly as we'd practiced. I caught a whiff of familiar perfume, the expensive kind that used to linger on our pillowcases, and knew without looking that Denise had arrived. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like exclamation points. When I finally glanced up, she was wearing a coral blazer that probably cost more than my entire suit, the kind of power outfit that screamed, "I've already won." She threw me that smile, you know the one. That poor Harold, always a step behind look she'd perfected over the last few months. I kept my face neutral and turned back to my notes. Let her play to the gallery. We were here for the judge. Jim, my attorney, arranged his own files with the precision of a master mechanic. Sequence, source, signature, he whispered. Our mantra for presenting the evidence. Keep your responses clean and direct. The bailiff called us to order, and Judge Martinez took the bench. I'd learned to read her face during previous hearings, neutral but alert, like a skilled diagnostician waiting for symptoms to reveal the real problem. Your Honor, Jim began, we've prepared a chronological presentation of evidence demonstrating systematic financial misconduct concurrent with documented infidelity. My hands wanted to shake as the first exhibit was marked, but I pressed them flat against the table's surface. The wood grain helped, gave me something solid to focus on while Jim laid the foundation. Exhibit A. Bank statements from the joint business account, showing regular withdrawals between March and November. I watched Denise from the corner of my eye. She was still wearing that confident smirk, but her fingers drummed slightly against her armrest. The gallery behind her, mostly her friends who'd shown up for moral support, whispered and nodded like they were at a fashion show. Jim moved methodically through the hotel folios next. Each one authenticated. Each one showing double occupancy despite single bookings. The judge's pen moved steadily across her notepad. And now, Your Honor, we'll demonstrate the correlation between these withdrawals and the defendant's activities in Miami. The timeline was beautiful in its simplicity. Every transfer, every flight, every hotel stay lined up like pistons in a well-tuned engine. No drama, just dates and dollars. Denise turned to the gallery again, seeking those reassuring nods. But I noticed a few of her supporters had stopped smiling. Numbers have a way of cutting through performance. Mrs. Bennett, Judge Martinez, spoke for the first time, adjusting her reading glasses. I see repeated withdrawals of $4,000 to $5,000. each occurring approximately 3 days before these Miami trips. She tapped a specific line item. Can you explain the business purpose for these transfers to your personal account? Denise's attorney leaned in to whisper something, but the judge held up her hand. I'd like to hear directly from Mrs. Bennett about these specific transactions. I kept my eyes on my notes, but I could feel the shift in the room's energy, like when you finally locate the source of an engine knock, that moment of clarity before the real work begins. The gallery had gone completely silent. The only sound was the soft whir of the courtroom's air conditioning and the gentle tap of the judge's pen against her desk as she waited for an answer. The silence hung there like exhaust in a closed garage until Judge Martinez nodded to Jim. Proceed with your next witness. Your Honor. We call Michael Rodriguez via video conference. I'd only spoken to Michael once during prep, but I remembered thinking he sounded exactly like the kind of guy Denise would target. Young, successful, eager to please. His face filled the courtroom screen, Miami sunshine spilling through his office window. Mr. Rodriguez, please state your relationship with the defendant. I met Denise, Mrs. Bennett, at the Riverside Lounge in Miami this past July. We began dating exclusively after that. My attorney let that word, exclusively, settle before continuing. And how did Mrs. Bennett represent her relationship status to you? She said she was single, recently divorced. Michael adjusted his tie. We spent most weekends together when she visited. I have the restaurant receipts and everything. Jim walked through the timeline methodically. Each date Michael mentioned clicked perfectly with our bank records and hotel folios. The yacht photos that had first caught my attention? Turned out that was Michael's boat, not some random party shot. And these charges at Marina Bay? Jim highlighted a row of transactions. Can you identify those occasions? Yes, sir. Those were our dinner dates at Costa. It's right on the water. Denise always insisted on paying. Said she had her own money from her business. I risked a glance at Denise. Her perfect posture had gone rigid, fingers white-knuckled around her pen. In the gallery, I caught whispered fragments. But she told us, and I thought she said. The screen split to show Michael's evidence alongside our bank records. Jim moved through them like connecting wires in a circuit. Dinner dates, hotel bookings, spa charges. Each one tied to withdrawals from our joint account. Mr. Rodriguez, when did you last see Mrs. Bennett? 2 weeks ago. We had plans for New Year's, actually. She was supposed to... Denise's attorney jumped up. Objection, relevance. Sustained, Judge Martinez said, but the damage was done. The gallery's whispers grew louder, and I saw several of Denise's friends gathering their purses. Jim clicked to the next exhibit. These photos from Mrs. Bennett's social media. Mr. Rodriguez, can you identify the locations? Sure. That's the Sky Lounge at Marina Bay. And that one's from the yacht club's summer party. I remember because... He kept talking, but I was watching Denise's support crumbling in real time. The friend who'd helped plan these girls' trips was staring at her phone, scrolling through old posts with new eyes. Another dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, shaking her head. Jim displayed the yacht club receipts next to Denise's Instagram stories. Champagne toasts, sunset cruises, designer shopping bags. Each charge traced back to our accounts. Each withdrawal perfectly timed to fund her Miami lifestyle. Just one more question, Mr. Rodriguez. During your relationship with Mrs. Bennett, did you ever meet or hear mention of other romantic partners? No, sir, we were exclusive. She even kept a toothbrush at my place. The gallery's silence broke. Not into whispers this time. Into that sharp intake of breath you hear when someone finally spots the leak that's been draining their tank. Denise's carefully crafted image of empowered independence was dissolving in a puddle of documented deceit. I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about fraud, about manipulation, about a calculated campaign of lies that had caught everyone, her friends, her lovers, maybe even her lawyers, in its web. One of Denise's closest friends stood up and walked out, her heels echoing against the marble floor. Others followed, leaving gaps in the gallery like missing teeth in a broken smile. The few who stayed wore expressions I recognized from my own mirror months ago. That stomach-dropping moment when you realize you've been played. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the murmurs. I believe we'll take our afternoon recess here. Court will resume in 30 minutes. The bailiff called out the formal dismissal, but nobody moved for a moment. They were all too busy watching Denise's world tilt on its axis, her coral blazer suddenly looking less like power and more like a caution sign nobody had heeded. Jim's closing argument started with a simple statement. This case is about math, Your Honor, not emotions. I watched him lay out our timeline on the projector. Each date marked with bank withdrawals, hotel folios, and social media posts. The precision of it all felt right, like finishing a complex repair job, where every part clicks perfectly into place. You know that feeling when you're double-checking your work, and everything lines up exactly the way it should? That's how it felt watching Jim connect the dots. Each piece of evidence was a gear in a well-oiled machine, turning smoothly into the next. Mrs. Bennett's pattern of financial misconduct directly correlates with her documented infidelity, Jim continued, highlighting key transactions. The timing isn't coincidental. It's coordinated. These aren't impulse purchases. They're calculated withdrawals made specifically to fund an alternate lifestyle. I glanced at Frank in the gallery, remembering those late nights in my shop when we'd spread everything out on my workbench. The smell of coffee and metal shavings still lingered in my memory as we'd pieced together this puzzle, one receipt at a time. Denise's attorney stood up, but something had changed in his posture. Gone was the swagger from 60 days ago when he'd filed those aggressive motions. My client simply exercised her right to personal growth, he argued, but his words felt hollow against our wall of documented facts. These trips represented a journey of self-discovery, a journey funded by unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts, Jim interrupted, pointing to the screen. Self-discovery doesn't justify financial fraud. I watched the judge making notes, her pen moving steadily across the legal pad. She'd been attentive throughout, asking pointed questions about dates and amounts. Now she was writing continuously, barely looking up as Denise's attorney tried to steer the conversation back to vague themes of empowerment. The court will take a brief recess to review these findings, Judge Martinez announced. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes for my ruling. The bailiff called out, "All rise," and I stood, feeling 60 days of tension in my shoulders. As we filed into the hallway, I caught Frank's eye. He gave me that slight nod, the same one he'd given years ago when we'd finished rebuilding my first transmission. It said everything. The work was solid. The proof was there. Now we wait. "You did good, Harold," he muttered as I passed. "Real good." The hallway buzzed with whispered conversations. I noticed Denise's former friends clustered near the water fountain, their phones dark for once. They'd spent 2 months sharing her posts about living her truth. Now they had the real truth, backed by bank statements and sworn testimony. I checked my watch, the same one I'd worn when starting this 60-day countdown. Its steady ticking had kept me focused through late nights of document review and early mornings of deposition prep. Now it marked the final minutes before judgment. "Court is back in session," the bailiff called. We filed back in, the gallery packed tighter than before. Everyone wanted to see the ending, even those who could barely look at Denise now. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, straightening my tie more from habit than necessity. Denise sat ramrod straight in her chair, but her confidence looked brittle now. The coral blazer that had seemed so bold this morning hung slightly crooked on her shoulders. Her attorney shuffled papers without really looking at them. Judge Martinez entered, carrying a slim folder. The room snapped to attention. I stood with everyone else, feeling the weight of 60 days' work narrow down to this moment. "Be seated," she said, adjusting her glasses as she opened the folder. The paper crinkled in the silent courtroom, the sound of consequences finally catching up to choices. I remained perfectly still, the way I do when diagnosing a tricky engine problem. Sometimes the most important thing is to wait and listen carefully to what comes next. The judge looked up, her expression unreadable as she prepared to speak. In the gallery behind me, I heard Frank shift in his seat, and I knew we were about to learn if our precision work would pay off. Judge Martinez cleared her throat. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony presented, this court finds the following." She adjusted her glasses, each word measured and precise. "The defendant's claims against the plaintiff's business interests are hereby voided." My shoulders relaxed for the first time in 60 days. Next to me, Jim gave a slight nod. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the court finds clear and convincing evidence of systematic financial misconduct through unauthorized transfers from joint accounts." She glanced directly at Denise. "These transfers, totaling $47,130 over 18 months, were made without the plaintiff's knowledge or consent, and used primarily to fund personal activities that breached marital trust." The gallery's whispers grew louder. I didn't need to turn around to know Denise's friends were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The same women who'd liked every Miami photo were now witnessing the price tag of that freedom. "The defendant's testimony regarding these expenditures lacks credibility," Judge Martinez stated, "particularly when viewed against the documented evidence of serial infidelity presented by the plaintiff." I remembered that first screenshot from Denise's friend's husband, how my hands had shaken while printing it. Now it was Exhibit A in a court record, along with every receipt and hotel confirmation that proved the truth. Therefore, this court orders full restoration of all misappropriated funds to the plaintiff, with interest. The judge's gavel punctuated each point. The plaintiff's business shall remain his sole property. The defendant's claims of contribution are dismissed with prejudice. Denise's coral blazer seemed to shrink on her frame. Her attorney scribbled pointlessly on a legal pad, probably calculating his final bill. Additionally, the judge added, given the defendant's breach of fiduciary duty, she shall bear all court costs and reasonable attorney fees. The room fell silent, except for the soft rustle of papers as the clerk prepared the final orders. I caught fragments of whispered conversations behind me. Can't believe all this time. Poor Harold. Denise stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Without a word to her attorney, she strode toward the exit, past former friends who suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. A reporter waited in the hallway. Someone must have tipped them off about the fraud angle. But Denise shouldered past, her heels clicking rapidly away. Jim guided me through signing the final papers, his efficient movements matching the steady rhythm we'd maintained throughout the case. Congratulations, Harold. You kept your cool and let the evidence work. I thanked him, gathered our binders, and shook Frank's hand on my way out. The courthouse steps felt lighter under my feet than they had this morning. Back home, I changed into work clothes and headed to the garage where I'd stored supplies for this moment. A young oak sapling, rich soil, and my grandfather's old shovel. The same one he'd used to teach me that anything worth building starts with proper foundations. The late afternoon sun warmed my shoulders as I dug into the front yard's soil. Each thrust of the shovel felt like breaking new ground in more ways than one. The earth was good here, dark and fertile beneath the surface, ready to nurture new growth. I worked steadily, the way I approach every task in my shop. Dig the hole twice as wide as needed. Mix the soil right. Set the root ball with care. My knuckles were still oil-stained from yesterday's brake job, but they looked right against the dirt. The oak settled perfectly into its new home. I tamped down the soil around it, remembering how my grandfather had said trees were living lessons in patience and persistence. They weather storms, he'd told me, by growing deeper roots. Standing back, I wiped my hands on my jeans and watched the young leaves catch the breeze. The tree wasn't much taller than me yet, but its roots were strong and sure. Given time and care, it would grow into something solid and true. The wind picked up, making the leaves dance. In that moment, looking at this symbol of new beginnings, I found the words I needed to carry forward. Betrayal can break you, or it can build you stronger.